Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Uncut History. Let's stop the video right there. Let's stop the video. Put me on there. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to another edition of Uncut History. Now, this week is going to be a preservation shout out. I'm going to be trying to do these once every month. Essentially, what these streams are, instead of us talking about a certain topic in history, we're just going to shill preservation efforts. There are hundreds of thousands. There might as well be, I might as well say millions of preservation efforts across the United States, across the world, and they all need your help. We can't help all of them. Historical preservation is like trying to drink from a fire hose. You're not going to get it all, but we could try our best to shine light on some that don't otherwise get attention. So, how's everybody doing tonight? Well, a little while ago, Maji-chan was in the chat and asked if the burning riverboat that's in the thumbnail is a Sultana. Yes, it is. We will be getting more into that later on tonight. A little more into that later on tonight. Now, normally, last week I managed to find a way to dual stream to Rumble. Sadly, I didn't have time to get the Rumble connected. So apologies about that. Hopefully next week I should get Rumble back in because we actually had more views last week for Rumble than we did YouTube. But here we are, anyways. So, without any further ado, something I want to talk about. I've been wanting to talk about this for weeks. I saw this pop up in my news feed, and I've always wanted to talk about it. Just haven't had time to talk about on Uncut History. But since it's the preservation shout out, I think it could count. So let's go share. I'm trying to share. I'm trying to shill things. All right, here we go. So, what's been going on is there has been some events occurring down in the Carolinas. Yeah, South Carolina. Sorry about that. There's two Carolinas in this state, and I always get them backwards. So around Camden, South Carolina, there is the Camden Battlefield. And the Camden Battlefield was the scene of quite an infamous battle. The American Revolution occurred back in 1780. For those that have watched the abysmal historical film known as The Patriot, the Battle of Camden's actually depicted, and it's a sequence where Mel Gibson and Heath Ledger's character are overlooking this battle between the United States armies and the British Army, and the United States Army get wrecked. And that's not actually too far from the truth. Horatio Gates commanded the American Army at this engagement. Gates was riding a high after what he claimed was his victory, just ignoring Benedict Arnold's role, his victory at the Battle of Saratoga. And when the British landed at Charleston, took the garrison there and started moving through South Carolina, Gates was sent south to stop the British. Well, it didn't end too well. It is still said that Gates is still running away from Camden to this very day. Now, what's interesting is back in last fall, there was an archaeological team, and they actually uncovered 13 remains of soldiers that fought at Camden. And they have found one of them is actually a British soldier. So both American and British remains were uncovered on Camden Battlefield. And just this past April, they actually interred those 13 bodies.
A 21st century funeral for an 18th century Highlander on American soil.
We gather to recognize, memorialize, and reinter the earthly remains of 13 of the 14 found hastily buried in this dirt.
Thousands turned out in South Carolina to mourn, and it was a funeral like no other, honouring British and American sacrifices from the 18th century after archaeologists made a remarkable discovery. On this soil in 1780, the Battle of Camden claimed the lives of thousands. It was one of many hard-fought conflicts against British rule that eventually led to the creation of the United States of America.
This is not only a once-in-a-career, but never-in-a-career opportunity. So it's been such an honor and a privilege to be able to help understand who these individuals were and how they may have died. The Highlander was our deepest buried individual, much more than the other individuals. Some people were this far below the surface. You could really witness from the burial context how hastily buried they were, and historical accounts of some not having been buried at all. The day that we exhumed him, someone brought a bottle of scotch to commemorate the event and give him a toast.
Soldiers from 2nd Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, flew over especially to be pallbearers for the remains of one of those unearthed here. His heritage traces back to the British 71st Regiment of Foot, Fraser's Highlanders, a Scottish regiment formed for the Revolutionary War.
It's something that's very humbling and I think thought-provoking in terms of thinking back at the history, and then also hundreds of years later being able to be involved in giving the soldier the send-off he deserves is something that I'll be proud in years to come of.
Across all three services, we have 850 service personnel across 30 states out here working, and literally, hand in glove, the closest military relationship we have, working extremely closely with all of the US services. It's a relationship we really cherish.
So we're all operationally experienced soldiers, but to lay a soldier to rest in the battlefield where he died almost 250 years ago, I think adds a sense of significance for us. And it's not lost on us that we've got soldiers in our battalion who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in recent operations as well.
We're just mesmerized by the fact that Great Britain chose to fly them here from Scotland to do this. I think for both nations, it's important to reconnect with our history and understand who we are, how we got here, how then we transition from enemies to close friends. And the mood in the town of Camden and in Columbia yesterday is just palpable.
I'm not gonna. If you want to watch the rest of the video, and I do encourage you to watch the rest of it, there's a link down in the chat. What is going to happen? From what a little I've gathered, there is going to be a Soldiers National Cemetery installed at Camden going forward, because it's possible that they're going to find more graves at that battlefield. They've found 13. They're going to likely find more. And as the one archaeologist said, they're anywhere from a few inches under the soil to several feet down. Now, I saw a question in the chat. How do they know if he was a Highlander? I'm going to presume it's from the fact the buttons that they were finding around the skeleton. Of course, most of the clothes would have either they took the clothes off of him before they buried the Highlander, or if they didn't, the buttons. And that's how a lot of skeletal remains have been identified throughout on battlefields, throughout different conflicts, is by the buttons that they cover with. It's so fascinating, like the change in buttons. That's why you get people so into buttons, especially in the history community, because everybody has their own slightly different make of buttons. So those can be a way to identify some of these skeletal remains. So the holdup that is right now, so I think they put him in a temporary grave at this point. Eventually, like I said, they're going to have a proper national cemetery. The holdup is they don't. The British government are undecisive if they're going to have the Highlander interred at Camden or if they want him returned back to the United Kingdom. And I'm going to throw it to the chat. What do you think they should do? Do you think the British government should allow the United States government to bury this unknown Highlander at Camden, or should they be returned to their proper soil back in Scotland? I would like to hear that in the comments. Now, another little thing I wanted to talk about, this is actually from the last preservation shout out. I'm going to have to stop sharing. Go back in, share again. God, sharing is so difficult. I probably make it more difficult than it should be. I'm going to be straightforward. Share. All right, there we are. So, if you remember the last preservation shout out, we were talking about the Monumental Project. This is an effort to establish a monument to American Civil War veterans that moved to the United Kingdom after the conflict. And one of their fundraising goals have just arrived, and that are reproductions of the medals that were given out to veterans throughout the United Kingdom. These were made back in 1910. The original was made in 1910, and they were given out to veterans of the American Civil War. So what the Monumental Project has done to encourage fundraising, they have actually fabricated reproductions. And Yes, I'm going to try to get my hands on one of these. They're so cool. Look at the detail. Look at the detail. This is really good for them. Very good. Very cool. So, yes, but that was on the last preservation shout out. You're here for what we're going to talk about on this preservation shout out, aren't we? Yes, ancient Rome didn't exist. It's merely imagination of the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody suspects the Spanish Inquisition. And Manji's saying that's likely that she believes that the British government will take him back. Yes, the Celtics are strong and stubborn about their home. Indeed, indeed. All right, so we're going to kind of float down the Ohio River Valley for this one, and we're going to start off in Youngstown, Ohio. Okay, I know we're not literally on the Ohio River yet, but bear with me. We're starting in Ohio. We're going to start with the Youngstown Steel Heritage Museum, or the J&L Narrow Gauge Railroad, which has become more famously as. So we're going to read a little bit about them. Located in Youngstown, Ohio, the G&L Narrow Gauge Railroad is a 24-inch gauge steel mill demonstration railroad where historic narrow gauge rail equipment used in steelmaking and heavy industries preserved and operated. The centerpiece of the railroad is J&L 58, a 45-ton Porter 040 tank locomotive once used by Jones and Laughlin Steel in Pittsburgh. You know, the home of yours truly. We regularly operate the 58 on our ever-expanding on-site trackage, keeping the spirit of steel mill steam railroading alive in Youngstown, Ohio. Our 2023 season will start in June. Admission remains $8 a person. Children 5 and under are free. Train rides are 15 minutes, and a ticket entails the visitor to ride as many times as they please. Currently, we have about 1,000 feet of track. You can arrive at any time between 10 to 2 to ride the train, as the runs are every 20 to 30 minutes. Thank you for your interest in the smallest railroad with the heaviest locomotives. I hope you see you trackside very soon. Signed, Rick Rowlands, Superintendent and Chief Mechanical Officer of the J&L Narrow Gauge Railroad. So this has been a grassroots museum that's been going on past 10 to 15 years now by these gentlemen from Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio. And if I can go back to the home page. And essentially what they've been up to, they've been acquiring this railroad equipment from steel mills. Now, obviously, 58 here is puny compared to the bigger locomotives like number 11 we rode on the Everett Railroad on Retracing History a few weeks back. But they're not meant for mainline service. These are meant to shunt cars in the steel facility. So taking cars of coal to the coke ovens, taking cars of coke over to the steel mills to help in the steel making process, take ingots of steel to the fabrication plants. You get the picture, to help to move things around the steel mill shops. So they've been, originally they acquired number 58 and restored it to operating condition, but now they actually acquired 2 more locomotives. This is 57 and this is number 60. I think they actually acquired them up in Canada, of all places. They also been operating this small Brookville locomotive. I think is it a gas or I think it's a gas locomotive there. Little itty bitty one, but it gets the job done. And then this is the custom passenger car that they have made for their passenger excursions. And they're going to build. Oh, hold on, Mike. You're not seeing anything, but my computer's going wanky. They're going to build a small caboose for their little train. Now, they also have, I'm trying to see if I can get they actually have more. Youngstown Steel Heritage. Yeah, very professional, my stream, I know. No, I am wondrous. Okay, that is just okay. So that is the website. Okay, because I wanted to show you guys they have more than just this. It's not. This didn't start as a railroad museum. What this started was they were preserving chunks of machinery from the Jones and Laughlin plants in Pittsburgh and Youngstown. So they got this giant crane in this building on the same location as this railroad. It's huge from the photos I'm seeing. I think they believe it's actually at least the largest one of the largest cranes surviving in the United States. And they got turbines, got all these giant hunks of equipment preserved on site. But then they acquired 58 and started doing this little railroad excursion business. And it has kind of become the featured attraction of their museum. We'll look at their online store. Everybody got to have a good store. You can buy magnets. You can buy mugs. I can use a mug. I like coffee. Got a shirt. Everybody needs a shirt. Don't you need a shirt? And we can also do the join us. Join us. You can become a member of the J&L Narrow Gauge Railroad either through a patron of $5 a month. You can become a regular, which is $20 for the whole year, or a crew member, which is $50. So if you're in the Youngstown area, might not be a bad idea to join them out to become members of this program. They're a 501c non-for-profit. They need your assistance. Let's take a look at some of their news. Oh. Okay, it looks like that one's a little broken. Now, what's going on right now, Liz? I want to go back to this. What's going on right now? They have deduced that 57 can be restored to operating condition. And if they can get 57 into operating condition, that means they'll have 2 steam locomotives operating, 2 narrow gauge steam locomotives, and that's awesome. But 57, of course, is going to need a lot of tender love and care. And if you want to be able to see 57 run back to service, you can donate to the Youngstown Steel Heritage Center. And I am going to drop a link in the chat right about now. Right about now. Oh, looks like we got somebody in the chat here. Hopefully you're still here. Coal and Steel Railroad videos. Yes, it is a gas locomotive. I'm a volunteer there. Do you happen to have any questions? Yes, I actually do. So if you're going to be able to answer in the chat, could you tell me, if you could tell me, I'm figuring how I'm going to word this. So you guys got a couple, I know, larger locomotives. So I know you're not going to plan to restore to operating condition, but you have these larger piece of rolling stock. I think you guys have a caboose, and I know you guys have like a cab on like a center cab locomotive on the property. Is there a plan to cosmetically restore, which means, paint it up, make it look back to its original livery? That's what I'm interested in. And while we're going through, Maji-chan, Grandpa was an old engineer. I got to go to the Gold Spike reenactment in Utah for the anniversary. Oh, yes. In fact, that was the anniversary for the Gold Spike was yesterday. Yesterday was the anniversary for the Golden Spike. They were doing their big festivities again at Promontory Summit. Now, you can actually see the reenactment. I think it's like every weekend they do the reenactment at the national park. But the official anniversary, the big reenactment, of course, was yesterday. I think I already showed Coal and Steel Railroad's videos one. But yes, I'm very excited about this. Out of curiosity, have you guys been seeing what I've been sharing lately? Hold on. That'd be very awkward. Okay, good. Because I came back and then we were still at the Revolutionary War. Hey, I'm still learning. I'm still learning the yard of the stream, yarning the stream. So yes, if you want to help the Youngstown Steel Heritage Organization, aka the J&L Narrow Gauge Railroad, get 57 back up into service so we can have the sister of 58, 2 steel narrow gauge railroad locomotives working simultaneously, consider donating to their corporate, their non-for-profit. There's a link in the description below if you want to go and view the website yourself. But with that out of the way, we're going to move a little bit further down the Ohio River. We're going to something I discovered last night. So I was on the Drink with Crazies Gilded last night, and I was talking briefly with Maji-chan, who's in the chat. We started talking about boats. Boats that have been sinking off of the Northwest coast. So after I nodded off and woke back up in the middle of the night, I started to watch some videos relating to ships that had sunk off of the Pacific coast. And then in my recommendations, I saw this video of a rusted ship that they were calling the ghost ship of the Ohio River. How did I get from the Pacific to the Ohio River? YouTube's a weird place, man. YouTube's a weird place. So, our next project. Oh, before we leave. Yes, one caboose is getting in corporate colors, and the other is going to be staying in Conrail, but freshen up for now. They both and they're both bay window cabooses. Very cool, very awesome. And I always like Conrail Blue. I'm biased toward. I'm sure in the 80s everybody was sick of seeing Conrail Blue, but now it's like, oh my god, the baby blue. I miss it so much. All right, now I'm getting distracted by the Consolidated Rail Corporation. But without any further ado, let us move down to the Sachem, the USS Sachem. So, this ship, by God, has one of the most fascinating stories, and I can't do it justice, but we're going to talk a little bit about it. So, this is the USS Sachem. It's in a little creek that feeds into the Ohio River, and what's left of the USS Sachem. This ship has gone by many names: the Celt, the Sachem, USS Sachem, USS Panakite, the Sightseer, Circle Line number 5. It's a 118-year-old ship with one of the longest, most diverse, most historical careers, which makes it an important witness to American maritime history. It started as a racing steam yacht, then it was used as an anti-submarine patrol craft, then it was a secret floating laboratory, more on that later, a party fishing yacht, an armed coastal submarine chaser, and finally a sightseeing ship. What is this place? What is this thing all about? Oh, I'm just cheating. I'm spoiling. The history of the Sachem. Sachem started in 1901 in Delaware. It was intended to be a luxury steam yacht. It was built by the Pussy and Jones Company and a shipbuilder at the time. Opened in 1848, the Pussy and Jones shipyard was in activity until 1959. Reading through. Steam yacht was originally ordered in 1901 by famous businessman John Rogers Maxwell from Manhattan. He was one of the wealthy figures of the late 19th century. He had a stunning mansion and garden on Long Island. He was the chairman of the executive committee of the Central Railroad of New Jersey and president of the Atlas Portland Cement Company for many years. And there's Mr. Maxwell right there. The construction of the Celt, that later became the Sachem, started in 1901. Was completed in 1902. There she is in her first scheme. Yacht is 186 feet long and 170 feet at the waterline, 24 feet wide, 12.5 feet deep, and about 25 feet high without the mast and smokestacks. Now, this is where things start getting a little interesting. Oh, his racing team won the King's Cup in 1907, sailing another yacht called the Queen. All right, let's keep moving down. So, ended up with a Matkeff Senior. It's used off the New Jersey coast. I'm kind of reading some of the stuff myself for the first time. This is even the stuff I was going to talk about. Here we go. The strike of World War I induced a turning point for the world, included in the United States and the Sachem. German tactics to defeat Britain was to block supply lines coming from North America. Indeed, the supplies for the Allies entered Europe through Britain. Germany would attempt to besiege Britain, provoke starvation and economic weakness. The newly invented war submarine, the U-boat, was deployed massively in the Atlantic to dissuade Allied convoys to reach British harbors. In March 1917, on the belief that the U.S. would enter the war, the German Kaiser adopted an unrestricted warfare policy, which meant U-boat crews were required to target and sink any ship suspecting of Allied supplies. So the U.S. Navy began requisitioning private crafts for rent. The yachts were more versatile in size, speed, and maneuverability, enough to outmaneuver and spot German U-boats, and would constitute perfect fleet auxiliaries. Dog's going crazy. Cat's probably at the stairs. Bear with me. The Sachem was one of these private yachts requisitioned by the Navy on July 3rd of 1917 and renamed USS Sachem. The prefix SP for Sector Patrol is a World War I designation for the patrol crafts. See, my cat loves going down to the bottom of the stairs where there's a partition between the stairs and the dogs. And he knows that the dogs can't reach him, so he likes being an asshole. So the Sachem, believe it or not, it was used as a patrol ship. And then eventually they started using it as a laboratory. The Navy needed new and creative ways to defend against the Germans. They turned to Thomas Edison, famous inventor of one of the world's greatest minds and inventors, and an unmatched genius considered as the father of modern electricity, even though Tesla improved upon it and thought of way better things. He was the first to conceive a machine that could record sound, phonograph, the kinetograph, the first light. It's Edison, light bulb, boom, bang, boom. Anyways, Edison was tasked by the U.S. Navy to come up with various ideas how to combat the U-boat. Better ways that the United States can defend against U-boats. And Edison, with the help of the U.S. Navy, converted the USS Sachem into a floating laboratory. And this is the first official naval laboratory the United States Navy had. Sorry about that. I just had someone blasted in my ear. From August to October 1917, Edison conducted numerous experiments on the Sachem along the East Coast in New York and Floridian waters and the Caribbean. Edison, enabled to work at real conditions, dedicated all of his time to naval research. While his relations with the U.S. Navy were tumultuous, he developed 45 to 50 projects, including the collision mats and kite rudder, which had potential, but none were ever put into production due to the lack of belief and preparedness of the administration. So the Sachem became Edison's laboratory during the First World War. But it gets even more interesting, folks. So later on, it was used again as a yacht, luxury yacht. We got a gentleman shooting off of the yacht. There's the Sachem again. Fastest and finest. Luxury yacht, indeed. I don't see it mentioned, but I'm pretty confident that both at one point Teddy Roosevelt and later in life Theodore Roosevelt actually rode on the Sachem at one point. I remember seeing that in the video I was watching last night, but I don't see it mentioned anywhere. Anyways, once we get to the Second World War, it was requisitioned again and was rechristened the USS Pennicite, the name of a rare gemstone. And it was actually equipped, you can see, with firing platforms, equipped to drop depth charges, and essentially it was used for coastal patrol throughout the Second World War. Now, after all this hoopla, it ended up being used for sightseeing around Manhattan and around New York City, and then things get weird. So it sat and neglected off of the New Jersey shore for many years. And then in the 1980s, a gentleman by the name of Robert Miller purchased the yacht, and the intention was he wanted to move it to his property and restore it. The problem was his property was near Cincinnati, and you're not trucking this. So he strapped this General Electric motor to the derelict ship. He and a few friends drove this dilapidated yacht up the Hudson River, across the Erie Canal, into the Great Lakes, down past Chicago, down to the Ohio River, and up to his property in Ohio. I kid you not. The guts that takes, there's another photo of it, the guts that this takes. It was the 80s, man. You can do a lot of this stuff. You couldn't do this today. But there it is. He did it. And he brought it to his property, but unfortunately, he had exasperated all of his funds by doing this massive move throughout the waterways of North America. He later sold the property where the boat was, and, well, that's where it's been ever since. So here it is, the first naval laboratory used by Thomas Edison. And again, I'm pretty positive both President Teddy Roosevelt and President Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, were both standing on this boat at one point, and countless other famous individuals. Oh, I forgot to mention too, while it was hung up in New Jersey, this ship was actually used in the backdrop of a Madonna music video. I forget which one it is. I don't listen to Madonna, but I remember reading about that in passing. So just add that to this storied legacy of this hunk of rust. It's actually sitting on a Kentucky coast, but it's across from Ohio near Cincinnati. So that's where it sits. Or is it? Is it the final resting place? Well, you know where this is going. You know where this is going. So there is an effort to try to get the Sachem out of its gully in Kentucky. And the idea is to restore it. And there you can see a bit of an image of what it may look like if it's restored to its original condition. Now, I'm going to be pretty honest. It's a rusted hulk at this point. I don't know if you could. If you did try to restore it, you're going to have to replace so much that it's not even going to be the original ship anymore. And then you get with the question, if you've replaced so much, is it the original anymore? Is it a reproduction now? I think what would be best is to get this moved and build a museum around it, or contribute it to a already existing museum and build a pretty large exhibit around it. So you have the husk of the Sachem in the middle, and they have all these displays around explaining the history, explain what this has all been through. But hey, if they're able to raise all the funds to bring it back to its old condition, I mean, I'm not going to stop them. So the many people who have not forgotten the ship and share a common past with it, and especially the Sachem Project members, wish to materially and symbolically save this important piece of American history. We would want, as soon as possible, to prevent the damage made to the USS Sachem by constant and unrestricted public access. Indeed, over the past years, the condition of the ship has reached critical levels, becoming dangerous for clandestine visitors. Our end goal is to conduct the progressive restoration of the Sachem, aka the ghost ship, to seaworthiness for use as a museum of itself. For so, we have investigated technical possibilities and identified the following phases. Part 1, extensive research and legal protection. Part 2, cleaning and security works. Part 3, refloating operations. Part 4, structural works out of water. Part 5, installing and modifying machinery up to current standards. And Part 6, exterior work and finishes. If you share our will to save the ship, collaborate with us to spread awareness. The future of an irreplaceable part of our history is at stake. And then, of course, you can see at the bottom is the donate. So what I'm going to do now, I am going to drop this link into the chat. Oh, Trippy needed food a little while ago. See ya, Trippy. See ya. Enjoy your time. So, if you want to see this unique piece of American history preserved, there's the link, the USS Sachem Project. Gosh, I'd love to see this thing get put in. Like I said, if they're able to get this back floating, I want to see that. Don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to think realistically. I know that the National Park Service, when they uncovered the USS Cairo, which was an ironclad ship used during the American Civil War, when they uncovered it out of the Mississippi River, they didn't restore it. They took the ruins, put it in this giant open air museum, and then you can see the ruins. And they have like they have a metal framework to show you what the outline would have originally been. And then you can see the original wooden remains with the original cannons. I think something similar like that'd be I think that'd be a good way to interpret the remains of the USS Sachem. But what do you guys think in the chat? Let me know. But we do have one more project to shout out. Now, first we do that, we have to do my my quintessential water break. Gotta have. All right, we're back. We're good. We're good. All right. We're going to stick to talking about maritime history of the United States rivers. Ooh, the WW concrete ships. What are the WW concrete ships? So, we're going to go down the Ohio River. In fact, we're going to go into the Mississippi River. And I was talking about it earlier. Our final discussion tonight is the USS Sultana. The Sultana Disaster Museum, telling the story of the deadliest maritime disaster in United States history, is located in Marion, Arkansas. Hey, we're back in Arkansas. We saw him talk about Arkansas in the last chats. Like Arkansas can't escape me. In the early morning hours of April 27th, 1865, the steamboat Sultana exploded into a fiery blaze on the Mississippi River, eventually drifting and sinking near the Arkansas banks. At the Sultana Disaster Museum, we tell the story of the disaster and those individuals who experienced it. So, this, a little bit of background on this ship. It's right after, technically the American Civil War is still occurring, but Lee's already surrendered at Appomattox. I believe Johnson's about to, or he just surrendered at Bennett's Place in the Carolinas. And that leaves the USS Sultana. So the USS Sultana, it's not the USS Sultana, Spencer. Hey, look, it's been a long day. Brain's a little cross. The Sultana was a river steamboat that was used on the Mississippi River, going up and down from Vicksburg all the way up through Memphis. And essentially, it saw its service. It was meant to typically carry, I think it was meant to carry about like 300 people. It was meant to carry on average, carry cargo up and down. Well, with the war over, all of these Union prisoners of war that were held by the Confederates are released, and they need a way to get home. So the United States government starts sending out contracts, lowest bidder deal. It's like, hey, if you can get us in this amount of time, buy these contracts and get these soldiers back home, take them up the river back to northern states. And the captain of the Sultana accepted. The captain / also owner of the Sultana. Now, as I said, Sultana was only designed for 300 people at most. He put nearly 1,500 people on the ship. Yeah, actually there, yeah, nearly oh my God, 2,200. Oh my God, I was underestimating. He put 2,000 people on his little steamboat. My God. So clearly the Sultana was overcrowded, and it made its slow way up the Mississippi River, and which is still something that's still up to debate. It's unsure if it was a coal dust explosion. There is a rumor that it was sabotage. I don't personally believe it, just because there's no reason to do it to this stage in the war. Something erupted in the bowels of the Sultana, a massive explosion. Ship, of course, sank in the river. 1,200 of its 2,200 passengers and crew were killed in the explosion and fire. Designed to carry only 376 passengers plus crew, investigations revealed a litany of corrupt practices, including kickbacks and bribes paid to high-ranking Union officers, causing the overcrowding of the boat. Now, the reason you haven't heard about that, and this is the deadliest maritime disaster in American history, and depending on the numbers, I've heard some people say as many as 1,700 people were killed on this ship. That's still disputed. If that's the case, this disaster is deadlier than the Titanic. Why haven't you heard about it? Because President Lincoln was assassinated a few weeks earlier, and that's what was in the news. And the country couldn't bear a second tragedy like this, so it kind of got snubbed. Most of the newspapers just kind of ignored it. If they wrote about it, it was in the final pages in small excerpts. And because of that, the Sultana has been largely forgotten. But as clearly as you can see, there is a group that has established a museum to interpret the events of the Sultana. And hey, we got a video. I think we should click on that video. Now, I'm going to have to remove. Don't worry. We're going to watch the video, guys. Don't worry. I have to do this. So I found, if you're using StreamYards, my little trick I've noticed, if you're having problems with the audio, typically I've noticed if you share through the tab, not the window, if you just share the tab of what you want to see, you get the audio. But if you try to do it with window, it doesn't work out too well. That's what I've noticed. That's what I've noticed, at least. So here we are. Let's watch it. Is it buffers?
The Sultana is a story of needless tragedy and the greed and corruption that led to it. But it's also a story of bravery and sacrifice. The Sultana is the deadliest maritime disaster in American history, yet it's probably a story you've not been told.
The Sultana was a Mississippi steamboat that had a charter by the federal government to bring home Union prisoners of war, and the government was paying the captain per soldier. The legal capacity of the Sultana was 376 people.
At Vicksburg, through a chain of bribes, the captain had almost 2,000 recently released Union soldiers squeezed onto the boat.
Most of them were starving and weak from months of being wasted in Confederate prisons. Among those on board was one John Clark Ely, a volunteer from Ohio.
John Clark Ely was captured near Nashville on December 5th, 1864. And on Christmas Day, as he was being taken towards Andersonville, he wrote in his diary, "Will another Christmas find us among family and friends again?" John Clark Ely and 2,000 of his comrades were placed on the Sultana, which he described as a large but not very fine steamboat.
The Sultana left the wharf at Vicksburg and headed upstream. At Helena, it docked to pick up a few passengers, and here photographer Thomas W. Banks showed us what the Sultana looked like as she made her way upriver.
John Clark Ely wrote in his diary that day, "Oh, a very fine day, upward still we go." The Sultana docked at Memphis at 6 p.m. and stayed there until midnight, and then steamed northward on the flooded Mississippi River.
When the Sultana was about 7 miles north of Memphis, at 2 in the morning on April 27, 1865, her boilers exploded.
Hundreds of men were killed instantly by the superheated steam, the shrapnel from the exploding boilers, and within a few minutes, the entire superstructure was on fire.
Initially, there was a mad rush to get off the boat, but once these guys on the bow realized that the flames are going to the rear, they sort of stopped. But then what happens is one of the paddle wheel housing will burn away, and it starts to turn the boat. When the boat turns, the flames are now blown towards them. And now you have a second mad panic off of the bow. And this is where you have a second mass drowning of guys grabbing each other, and almost hundreds going down at one time.
When the sun rose that morning, over 1,200 people were dead or dying.
As a point of reference, the USS Arizona, when it was attacked on December 7th, 1941 by the Japanese, lost about 1,200 men also. Everybody remembers Pearl Harbor and remembers the Arizona, but how many remember the Sultana?
John Clark Ely never made it home. Along with the hundreds of men that were recovered, lie buried in graves that simply state, "Unknown U.S. soldier." The men on the Sultana are men that deserve to be recognized, to be remembered by a country that they fought to preserve.
Our project is to create a permanent Sultana Disaster Museum that's worthy of the significance of this event, because we believe this story needs to be told now more than ever.
We really need a Sultana Disaster Museum to remember the Sultana disaster. The men, the women, the children, the crew.
I had a relative that was on board who was the president of the Survivors Association. I didn't know about it. I knew of Andersonville, but not the Sultana. We can't lose that history.
In the little bitty museum that we've had visitors from all 50 states and 14 foreign countries. We know that with a large museum built to national standards, about 50,000 visitors would visit the museum every year.
We want them to get lunch, dinner, cup of coffee. We want them to shop, and that money gets spent in our community and stays in our community. And we feel that there will be 140 jobs that will be created either directly or indirectly by the museum. The Sultana Historical Disaster Museum is forecasted to open at the end of 2023. The construction and renovation cost on the building itself is just under $4 million. Our capital campaign is 7.5. That 3.5 over and above the cost of renovation will be used for marketing, will be used for property acquisition for area around the museum, a signature film, and then our architecture fees. As economic development, this can be equal to a car manufacturing plant or a steel mill. But the bottom line is there will be money that comes into our community that's not here now. There will be people that will be coming into our community that are not here now. And our people that live here will benefit from that.
This is the best project for this region right now. So the state has to be a part of this. We've got to put money to it. We're going to benefit from it. We're going to be the biggest beneficiary of this project.
The City of Helena, West Helena, and I personally are committed to helping raise the money for this group. I think we owe it to the victims and their families who were denied a monument. I think we owe it to the survivors who were denied a pension. I think we owe it to ourselves today to remind us of where we once were in our country and where we could be again.
We study our history to learn from our past and not repeat its mistakes. But we've not told this story the way it deserves to be told. This is our opportunity, our chance to change that, and we need your help. We need your help to tell this story, tell it well, and tell it to everyone.
So there we go, the Sultana Disaster Museum. They are very well under their way getting to their new location, but they do need your help. Let's jump over here. I want to show you the proper page. So these are some images of what the museum could look like should they finish it. It's in a repurposed school. I always love repurposing old school buildings. There's actually somebody locally who's been buying up old school buildings in the Pittsburgh area and turn them into apartment complexes, complete with like a gymnasium and laundromat. It's an ingenious idea. So reusing old school buildings, I am always down for that. But these are some ideas of what the museum could look like. And from what I've gathered, they have about 90% of the funds raised through already existing donations, grants, private grants, state grants. They may even have a federal grant. I don't know for certain, but they do need that last 10% to get them, and it's due by the end of the month. So if you want to see the story of America's deadliest maritime accident preserved and properly interpreted, be sure to check out the Sultana Disaster Museum. Give them a small donation. Everything will help. And that goes for all free shout outs I've given tonight. Any little bit will help these free entities preserve various parts of our shared past. All right. Now, normally this is the part of the show where I would shill a random item, usually something relating to culture, be it relating to, a book or comic or something. I'm going to kind of do that. What I'm actually going to do, I'm actually going to shill a live stream because he's shilling a comic. And I actually think most of the chat that was here earlier, I think I know where they went. So this is where they're at currently. So I am shilling the Mythicals
TV shows and movies
by
we got
Hojo
out of the 90s.
by Hojo Comics,
well,
which is this
sometimes not as creative
great,
as what
like,
we got out of the 80s.
what I'm getting
Definitely
from the
have much
trailer,
more of an
and I don't have time to play trailer, but this comic's essentially like a
like
like
I mean,
a
I feel like the
supernatural
90s perfected almost
X-Files is
everything.
kind of supernatural. It's
like,
like
I
event.
can't remember who was talking about
It's like
commercials.
X-Men
Remember how
meets
good
the
commercials were in the 90s?
I remember them
Tongue's
very
twisted.
well.
Now it's just like they
X-Files
take some
meets
classic rock shit and
X-Men.
like, oh, here's a
That
song that my
sounds
dad
right. That
used to
sounds
listen
right.
to.
Yes, with a lot
And
of
then we're gonna put it to
supernatural stuff
somebody,
thrown in.
a guy
It's a very good,
pretending to be a
interesting
woman. I'm like,
comedy,
dude,
and
shut
Hojo's
up.
been a very big
Stop.
supporter of the
There's
Iron
no
Age community. He's
point to
been
any of
very
these
vocal.
commercials
He's getting
anymore.
involved. Been a
At the
great
very
person
least,
to
they were
listen in
creative
and
and
shill his
inspiring.
work. So I am shilling his work,
Budweiser
and
took
you
the
can actually go
concept of
see him
3
shill his
frogs
work right now
sitting
on
on lily
John
pads
A.
saying
Douglas's
Budweiser.
stream. So
And
be
they
sure if
stretched
you have
that
not
out
done so
for
already
years.
to head over to John A.
I don't think a lot
Douglas's
of people
stream to
remember.
learn more about the
It
Mythicals.
went from the
whose
Budweiser
comic
frogs
campaign
to
will
the
be wrapping up
Budweiser
in about
lizards
2
who were
weeks.
commenting on the
All right,
frogs.
Yeah, I
I'm
to
gonna
just
head over
the
and actually
one
watch the live
lizard
stream.
talking
So
constantly.
until
I used to
then,
listen to a lot
you
of
know what
FM
this
radio.
means. It's
They
time to
did
play
way
the
more
music.
of these
Time to
commercials on
play
radio.
the song. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.